And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 54th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 356th edition overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, November 30th, 2017. I am your host, Jared Morris, and let's begin this week how we begin every episode of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And the banner moment this week for me, as I sat today and reflected on that very, very interesting and in so many ways encouraging game that Indiana played against Duke on Wednesday evening, I kept coming back to the second half and what Deron Davis did in the second half. And I know that it was an imperfect performance from Deron. He didn't make enough free throws in the second half, and he committed a couple of silly fouls in the first half and only got to play 4 minutes. But for that sequence in the second half, when he just dominated, when Indiana was committed to getting him the ball and he was taking future NBA lottery picks to school and they couldn't stop him, it was really impressive. And it made you think, man, we have got a dude down low. And obviously, again, he's going to have to play more minutes and he's going to have to, do a lot of those things and continue to improve. But what he can do down low and the identity that he gives this particular team and what he can mean moving forward is a huge, huge sign for the future of this program and for what Archie Miller is building, both in the midterm and the long term, and also just right here in the short term. I kept thinking about that play in the second half, and I don't remember if it was one of the ones that he scored on or that he got fouled on, and then he turns to the crowd and flexes. And a couple plays later, Robert Johnson went down into the lane, he didn't get fouled, but he absorbed some contact, made the shot anyway, and he starts running up the court and flexing. And it was almost like he saw Deron do it. It kind of rubbed off on him. And it was like Deron gave the team a bit of a swagger because he was dominating. And for that sequence, Indiana looked dynamite against Duke. And obviously the game didn't turn out how we wanted to. But, man, Deron Davis really showed how special he can be for that sequence in the second half. And just a great sign, again, for Indiana moving forward, both this year and in the future. All right, let me now introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, we have one of the world's most renowned bracketologists and the president of the suddenly resurgent Robert Johnson fan club. It is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line from the past week in Indiana basketball?
Well, I think, one of the big things that has emerged over these last few games as the team has continued to grow is, as we've handed out our game balls on the show, there's been a lot of them that have gone to guys like Robert Johnson, Juwan Morgan, Deron Davis, more recently. And I, look back earlier at really what those guys have done in the last 4 games. So basically the 4 games since the Seton Hall game. And if you look down that list, I mean, those are the 3 guys that everybody said are going to need to lead this team from a production standpoint. And they've really done that in those games. There's some of these numbers you can nitpick, and I'm not going to go over every one of them, but, Robert's averaging 16.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2 and a little bit over 2 assists, and under 2 turnovers a game. In that stretch, Juwan 16 points, 7 rebounds, 2.5 blocks over that stretch, and Deron 12.3 points, 5 rebounds, and a block of his own. He's had at least 3 fouls in each of those games, and so those things are problematic. But the other thing those guys all have in common is they're all shooting in those games 59% or better on 2-point field goals. So Robert is at 59.3, Juwan 65.5, and Deron 73.1. And so that's one of the things that we've, kind of come to rely on with this team is the ability to, make shots inside the arc, which feels a little bit different than what we've seen over these last few seasons. But, they're starting to develop that as a bit more of an identity offensively. And so while we know they have to knock down more shots from the perimeter to really, create spacing and free throws, I'm sure we may touch on again after the way things went down last night. But I think what you've started to see, in addition to the team playing better, is the most important guys in the team and the guys that this team really needs to play well have really stepped their games up. And that seems to be a trend that's emerging, and not just over the course of one game or a half or things like that. And so I think as you step back a little bit from the, looking at it game by game, it's nice to see those guys that we knew they would rely on really rising to the occasion over these last 4.
Yep. And to my right, we have a man who has absolutely no interest in your holiday basketball tournament's losers bracket. He's a columnist for the Big Lead and someone who definitely will not be sending a Christmas card to Coach K, nor probably receiving one. He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what is your rant from the past week in Indiana basketball?
Yeah, just to be clear, I took myself off of Coach K's Christmas card list. You know what I took away from the game the other night is it didn't turn out the way Indiana wanted it to, but they took Duke's best shot and sort of stood there and stared him down. And I don't think a lot of people expected that. I think a lot of people expected maybe they'll keep it close. Well, not you, Jared. You expected them to win. But I think most people expected they'd keep it close. They'd battle a little bit, but then eventually, Duke's talent would win out. That wasn't what happened. Duke was the more talented team, clearly, but it wasn't just talent out beating them. I think that a lot of things in the game just kind of wore on Indiana. The foul trouble was a big part of it. The fact that Duke was shooting in the double bonus for most of the second half really hurt. And I think that those were easy points for Duke, and Indiana didn't convert theirs. But as far as just a straight up talent on talent, man on man, who's tougher, who is a better basketball team, they stood toe to toe with what I think is easily the best team in the country, and took their best shot and were in the game until very late. And if not for a bad little run towards the end, they had a real chance to win that game. So I think that what we're starting to learn about this team isn't that it's a great offensive team, it's a great defensive team, it's this, it's that, or the other thing. This is a tough team, and they're playing tough, and they're playing like their coach would. And they're starting to be able to take a body blow from a team and not wilt and answer back and almost enjoy answering back. In boxing, you'd say that they're a team that's built to be in a slugfest. They're not a team that's built to stand on the outside and box and stuff. They want to get in there and they want to fight. And that was what I saw against Duke, was a lot of fight from this team that made up for the talent differential. And I think the Duke players even said that after the game too. And so did Coach K. I think, really complimentary of Indiana. And I think that's what happened, is this team showed that it's not going to be intimidated. It's not going to be scared. They're willing to fight. And that's what we saw last night.
Both coaches' post-game press conferences last night were outstanding. And I know Ryan won't endorse going and listening to Coach K's, but it was really good too.
Forget that guy.
But go to InsideTheHall.com because they have both of them. And I continue to enjoy listening to Archie talk about this team and basketball in general. And I think you'll feel excited if you haven't seen his comments from last night. Make sure that you go check them out.
You don't feel like there's any false positivity with Archie at all. You feel like when he praises his team, they've earned it, you know, and he's going to give you the straight talk.
Yeah, no, that is what it feels like. All right, so here's what we're going to discuss this week. We'll reflect a little bit more on Indiana's loss to Duke, and obviously then look ahead to the 4-game gauntlet that awaits Indiana beginning on Saturday. We also have our intern Michael Dugan here for a report live from Simon Scott Assembly. Well, he's not live in Simon Scott Assembly Hall now, but he was there last night, and he'll give us a report.
We did not just make him stay there like 24 hours later just to hang out so we could ask questions about it.
It'd be kind of cool.
A pillow, a sleeping bag, and a teddy bear, and let him stay in the stand.
It'd be kind of cool to spend 24 hours there at a Simon Scott Assembly Hall. I would do that. And then, let's kind of step back and take a big picture view of this team. What do we know about this team now, this far into the season? And what are we going to find out about them over these next 4 games? What do we need to find out about them? If they're going to be a team that can have some success in Big Ten play. So we're going to talk about that. And then you all send in a bunch of good questions. And so we will hit those in our Twitter Q&A. All of that coming here on Assembly Call Radio. Do want to offer you this quick reminder. The next time that you are looking for tickets to a sporting event or a concert, remember our friends at SeatGeek, especially now around the holidays. Tickets obviously to a sporting event, to a concert, to some other type of live event really makes a great Christmas gift because people have enough stuff, and I don't think anybody wants more stuff. So give someone an experience, and you can do that with SeatGeek, and you can do it by either downloading their app, which is incredibly convenient and easy to use, or if you want an easy to remember URL that will take you directly to the IU basketball ticket listings in particular, use the URL iutickets.shop. So not .com, but .shop. And so if you want to get tickets to, say the Iowa game coming up or another home game or even road games, any game this season, if you use that URL, iutickets.shop, it'll take you there and you can browse through all the listings and then find the best deal, because that's what SeatGeek does for you. And if it's your first time using SeatGeek, don't forget the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY. Use it when you make your first purchase, and you will get $20 back after that purchase. Again, the promo code is ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY. Alrighty, you are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and our intern Michael Dugan. And Michael, let's just talk about it right now, because obviously we've been reflecting on Duke here in this first segment, and pretty much
may or may not have been there for 24 hours straight. So.
Yeah, right. But from everybody that I have heard, people on the Duke side, media side, IU players, Grayson Allen even, talked about just how incredible the atmosphere was at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall. And it's not a surprise, because we know how crazy that venue gets, especially for big games. But what was it like for you being there? Was it as crazy as it's been since you've been a student at IU?
I'm going to try and put this into perspective as best I can. I was at Assembly Hall last year for the North Carolina game, and I was at Assembly Hall in February of 2013 for number 3 versus number 1 against Michigan. I thought that Michigan game was louder than the North Carolina game, but I think that game last night against Duke was louder than that Michigan game. And I sat in a pretty similar seat in terms of, proximity to the student section and to the court, and I thought last night was the loudest experience I've had within a basketball stadium, and obviously as well Assembly Hall. So
what was the loudest moment? Did you have a loudest moment?
There wasn't really a moment. I think if I had
Freddie's
to pick
dunk.
one, Freddie's dunk, that just absolutely blew the roof off the building.
Will that phrase Freddie's dunk go down like Marco Killingsworth's dunk?
Nah, no way. That was late in the game, man. That Killingsworth dunk, there was a lot of build behind that. Freddie's was great, but it was in the first half. So
Ryan is so protective of that memory. Protective of that memory.
Everybody who was there is protective of that dunk. Don't you say it. That has become a thing. And
Jared, I don't know if you heard, but Ryan was there at that game on press row.
Yeah, if you guys I was working for the Indiana News. I'm not sure we
couldn't even hear the person next to him. As you may not have heard, but yeah.
No, yeah.
I love that we've been doing the show long enough that we just know how to get each other going. That was an easy one. All right.
I'm just pulling highlights up on YouTube now. You guys can do the rest of the show. I'm just going to sit here.
Keep going, Michael. So what else kind of stuck out from the game last night?
Oh, I mean, the entire first half was just one consistent 60-minute strand of continuous noise. And in the second half, there were a couple of moments where Duke looked like they were going to pull away, and then it got a little quieter. It was not quiet ever by any means, but the noise level was reduced a little bit, and then Indiana fought back. And then when they tied it, when it was 69-68, I think that was probably the loudest point of the second half. And then it kind of teetered off from there. But I'm confident in saying that was the loudest game I've been to inside Assembly Hall, and I've been to 3 games that are probably top tier in terms of the noise in the recent history of that building.
Those are big ones. And if Oladipo and Jordan Hulls had completed that alley-oop in that IU Michigan game, that might have been the loudest moment.
Maybe my answer would have been different.
Yeah, maybe ever. You've been to a few other games this year, right? Because the crowds at the other games, obviously haven't been there, but they haven't, and the competition level obviously hasn't been great, but the crowds haven't been that impressive so far this year.
What's interesting, I gotta say, Duke just brings it out in people. I think, though, it's just that name. I mean, when they're ranked number 1, obviously it's a big deal. Undefeated, it's a big deal. I have talked to people because that Duke game that I went to was the last time Duke played at Assembly Hall, and they were also number 1 and undefeated, and Indiana was unranked. It was the same kind of situation. Indiana might have been ranked, but they weren't. It wasn't like close. It would have been a huge upset. And I've talked to people who were at the Kentucky game when Watford hit the shot, and who were at both games and have said, no, the Duke game was louder. And that shocks me because it's Kentucky. It's that big rivalry. But I just think that Duke brings it out in people. I think that's probably the story wherever Duke plays. I just think that there's an extra oomph behind it because of it's Duke, and they're easy to yell at and they're easy to get mad at.
Yeah. I'm just surprised you can hear us, Michael. I thought your ears might still be ringing.
They are honestly a little bit. I woke up this morning and there was still a little bit of ringing in my ears. It was, words can't describe. I'm not going to sit here and try to describe what it was because, I mean, I'm sure you could even pick it up on the broadcast. I heard from some people that at times you had trouble hearing what the commentators were saying, what they were saying, and I
Billis and Schulman kept referring to it as being just enormous and loud, and they expected it. When I talked to them in Maui, they expected that.
Yep. Name drop.
Trying to help people with their.
They were over there. They were over there.
He's got a lot of making it up to do here on some of these.
Yes, exactly. It's been a while.
Just give him a little space. Let him go.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that report, Michael. That was awesome. Stick around, hang out with us on the show if you want to. But coming up on the Assembly Call, we are going to look ahead to the stretch Indiana has coming up. And let's talk about what we know about this team that they have to lean on to have success in these games. That's next. All righty, 15:45 for the first segment. Hello to everybody watching on YouTube. Nice to see so many of you here and in the chat. Ryan, I'm sure you saw there were already requests for Coach K commentary.
This is a pretty packed show. I told them this is a pretty packed show. We'll probably have to
it is a pretty packed show.
With Big Ten play starting. But someday we will get to it, folks, and it'll be worth it.
It will. Okay, so for this segment, and this segment may spill into segment number 3, but let's talk about the things that we know for sure about this team. I'll kick it off with Duran because I've got some numbers, and then let you guys talk about it. I won't spend too long, but there's a couple numbers that I want to provide for that, and then I'm sure you guys have some other things as well for things that we know that we can count on. But I mean, pretty clear he's the focal point. Archie even said that tonight in his show.
Has to be.
Yeah. Okay. Who?
Well, he's the one place you can say that in most games he's going to be an advantage for us. Like, I mean, I think there's a lot of spots on this team where you can't say that. Might have more depth than the teams we face, but one-on-one, I mean, who can you look at and go like, oh, he's going to be better than the guy across from him? So.
Yeah. Did you see Jawan's comments? He talked about how he talks with OG every day, and OG just keeps telling him, man, you got to get here. You got to get here to the NBA. And Juwan said, that's the focus.
You're going to hate it so much when I'm right about that.
No. I will hate it every time you remind us, but I'll be happy that you're right about it because I love Juwan.
Me? Why would I ever remind you of something like that? Actually, one of these days with one of these things, I'm never going to remind you. I'm just because I think that'll frustrate you even more. You'll talk about it, and you just be like waiting for it. And I'll be like,
what are you talking about, man? I don't know. I don't remember saying that. All right, let's do segment number 2. Ready? All right, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Michael Dugan. And don't forget, if you ever have to miss all or part of an episode of Assembly Call Radio, there are 2 great ways to catch up. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Assembly Call. Or you can join our live Thursday night broadcasts or watch the video replays by subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. So we know Indiana faces a really tough challenge now. 2 Big Ten games with Michigan and Iowa, 2 games in 3 days. And then obviously you have games against Notre Dame and Louisville. This is really going to test the improvement that Indiana has made. And obviously the arc of that improvement since Indiana State has been impressive. And I think perhaps even a little bit unexpected. I don't know after seeing that game that a lot of us thought Indiana would be able to put forth the kind of performance that they did last night. So guys, I want to explore the things that we know for sure about this team, because I think there are still a lot of unknowns, playing a new system, a new coach, guys in new roles. There's still a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we'll address that too. But what do we know? What is the team's identity? What can it rely on game in, game out? And to me, it starts with Duran Davis, and I talked about him obviously in the banner moment. Archie Miller talked about him on his coach's show Thursday night, saying, I think our team understands that when Duran is in the game, playing inside out has been good to us. And we've seen that when Duran is on the floor, Indiana really tries to maximize those minutes by getting him the ball as much as possible. And my goodness, is he being efficient? Because according to Synergy Sports, Duran has used 66 possessions. So possessions that have either ended up in a shot or a turnover. And he has scored 84 points in those 66 possessions, which is 1.23 points per possession, which for context is in the 97th percentile in the country. And just to give you a comparison for some added context, Juwan Morgan, who's been very good offensively, he has scored 85 points in 78 possessions, which is 1.09 points per possession. That's really good. That's 83rd in the 83rd percentile, and Duran is light years above that. So the numbers certainly match what our eyes tell us in terms of his dominance in those moments when he's A, been on the court, and B, when Indiana has been able to get him the ball consistently. And he has improved across the board in pretty much every metric except just his offensive rebounding percentage, which is still very good. And, of course, the free throw shooting, which is down significantly from last year when he shot 75.6%. But that does give me hope that he'll be able to improve it this year. So, Andy, we'll start with you. To me, Duran is the one thing for sure that we really know about this team, that when he's in there, they're going to get him the ball, and that more often than not, when he gets the ball down there in the post, something good is going to happen for Indiana.
Well, and I think you've seen them do a progressively better job at actually getting him the ball. And there was a moment last night, we talked about it on the show, but he and Devontae Green were on the side. Devontae goes into him. He doesn't really have a move, kicks it out to Devontae, reposts, and gets the ball right back. And I think those are some of the things that you just wouldn't see with regularity last year. So I think while he's been effective when he's in there, I think those around him have done a better job of getting him the ball. And they obviously realize how much more smoothly things run on offense when he's really clicking, and that was readily apparent in the second half against Duke. So he's definitely the guy they can rely on and want to play through. The biggest concern, if there's a concern there, it's just that he has to find a way to stay on the floor. The foul trouble has continued to be a problem. And like I said, he's had at least 3 or 4 fouls in maybe the last 5 games, maybe even more than that. And so he's got to find ways to not commit the cheap fouls the way that he has continued to do even this season.
Ryan, what else? I mean, besides Duran, and feel free to comment on him if you want to, but what else do we know about this team?
Well, I think that as far as Duran goes, I'll be quick on it. I just think that if you look at this Indiana team across the board, there's one player you feel like will be better than the guy across from him on the other team in most games this year. I mean, I think that's Duran Davis. And I think that, you look at the rest of the team, we've got guys who maybe can match the opponent, or, from game to game, they'll certainly be better than their opponent. But when it comes to just a guy you can reliably is as talented or more talented or can get it done against other teams, it's Duran Davis. He's the one guy you can look at and say, all right, yeah, he can do this in every game. It's not a matchup thing. He can do this. So I think that he's certainly going to have to be the focal point. I think that's why you had Archie Miller talking about him all offseason. You know what? I also think an underrated thing is getting a kid like Race Thompson in early to play against him, and go up against him in practice is a big deal for Race. So I think that's a guy who can come in next year and maybe impact the game. So it's just lauding Duran Davis across the board here. The other thing that I think is something that this team can rely on is toughness and just being hard-nosed. And I think that you're starting to see that. I think that's been the biggest difference since the Indiana State game. People say, oh, the offense is better, the defense is better. No, I think they're just working harder. I really do. And
it's escalated quickly.
It really has. And it's also the kind of thing where, if you can look at it from the Indiana State game, but if you really look at it from the second half of the Seton Hall game, that's where the growth has come, I think. And I think that was very much a wake-up call for them that, look, in the first half, when you were playing hard, you were competing with a very good team. In the second half, where you didn't play as hard and you didn't play as smart, I mean, you didn't. And so I think that just toughness and hard-nosed play, which is Archie Miller's identity. I mean, that was his identity as a player. So I think that's, that's certainly rubbing off on this team, and they're starting to show that. And I think that that's something we can all, rely on, that this team's going to do. It may be absent in a game or two, but I think that it's going to be pretty reliable as the year goes on and get more reliable as it goes.
Yeah, and we can definitely rely on it's going to be a focus from the coach. I mean, that's for sure. It is going to be an emphasis every day, every game, no question about it. And hopefully the team continues to put that into play out there on the floor. Andy, what else do we know about this team?
I mean, I continue to go back to the 2-point shooting and some of the free throw rate numbers. I mean, those are, the 2-point shooting at close to 60% is probably not sustainable as much as we would like it to be. But I do think, it goes back a little bit to Duran and some of those things. I mean, but there are a number of guys who are shooting the ball really well from inside the arc. I think they've attacked the basket more. The free throw rate has come up, and the ability to get to the line. There's a lot of numbers on the offensive side that line up pretty favorably as you kind of look down the list of what Archie Miller teams have done more recently. I don't think defensively the numbers are quite there yet. I do think there's improvement, but they haven't really it hasn't really played out that way statistically. But I think on offense, really being able to score around the rim and do things there, which is going to have to be the case for a team that doesn't shoot the three all that well. But I think that speaks to the overall aggressiveness and the mindset and those kinds of things that you talked about. I think those things manifest themselves in numbers like 2-point shooting and the ability to get to the free throw line.
I mean, it really is. I gotta say, it really is amazing how this team has shifted from such a perimeter-oriented team to a team that is so much more efficient from 2-point range. And I mean, to some degree, their 3-point shooting has been kind of a mess, but the 2-point shooting, Andy's right, is such a huge deal, and the improvement there is staggering so quickly.
Is it also fair to say that we know that this team is really positively impacted by Colin Hartman? I mean, he's only played, I think, 22 minutes, but he played in the Eastern Michigan game. He played in the Duke game. And maybe it's no coincidence that those are by far Indiana's two best performances of the year. And I think, whether he's out there for huge minutes, and he was very productive in his minutes against Duke, it sounds like, and Archie has talked about this, just his presence. And he's able to lead better when he's in uniform and playing, as opposed to just kind of being on the sidelines and not taking part in stuff. And it allows his leadership to really shine.
Yeah, it's funny. He's like this team's security blanket. I mean, they're Linus and he's the blanket. They just are more comfortable when he's on the floor. It's so obvious. I mean, as soon as he comes on the floor, even just having him available for a game, I feel like, and maybe it's the kind of thing where like he's been around so long, it's like you don't want to disappoint him, and he's like your parent, but he changes the way he changes the attitude of the team, and they all play harder when he's on the floor, and he picks them up when they need it, clearly with his play, and I'm sure with vocally.
Yeah, and I think, something else that we know, and Archie mentioned this today, Andy, you can address this quickly, but Robert Johnson is going to give a lot of effort on defense. And Archie talked about, I don't think people realize how hard and how much of an impact he's making on the defensive end of the court.
Yeah, he really made things tough for Grayson Allen last night. You can take a step back after the fact and look at the stat line, but he really forced him to take some tough shots and really has taken some pride. You can tell in some of the assignments that he's drawn, really trying to shut down guys. He had trouble against Seton Hall, but I think by and large, he's been a guy willing to step up and take on the biggest challenge that there is on the other team defensively.
Yeah, and the other thing it feels like we know is that as long as Juwan Morgan stays healthy and keeps playing, he will continue his ascendance, because he has been playing absolutely spectacular basketball of late, and hopefully that will continue. All righty, what will definitely continue here is the assembly call. We will continue this conversation, and we'll also look at the biggest question marks that facing Indiana as we move forward here in the season. That's next on the assembly call. All right. There we go. 16. All right, beautiful. All righty. So now, any other things that we know that we didn't hit?
I thought that was pretty thorough.
That was pretty.
Because I don't think we know.
We don't know that much. Yeah.
I don't think we know that much.
Yeah. So we should spend more time talking about the questions.
Yeah. I mean, I think the turnovers is kind of an interesting one to talk about. I don't think it's to a point yet where we know they're not going to turn the ball over, but
I would bring that up, Andy. I would use that as a question mark.
Let's start with that.
But four straight games
mark.
of, I forget whatever that stat was, but 4 straight games of, fewer than 10 turnovers for the first time in who knows when, I think it's a positive trend, but I don't think probably everybody's still a little, gun shy to feel too good about that one, but that might be the only other thing that I would talk about. At least it's positive. I think probably other things you can talk about. They're going to struggle from 3-point range offensively, but
now let's transition with that one, because it's a thing that we feel like we know, but 4 games, that this group of players still has to prove it, that consistently against good competition, because a lot of those turnover numbers were racked up against South Florida, Arkansas State, Eastern Michigan, and the turnover rate wasn't great in the second half against Duke. So, when it was kind of winning time. So that's kind of an interesting one. So let's hit that one off the top, and then we'll kind of go from there. I mean, there's plenty of questions. And let's shoot. We've got 26 minutes for these two segments. No, 24 minutes for these two segments. So we'll shoot for about 14 minutes on this one, and then there's some good questions that we can hit at the end. And Michael, if you have something, let me know in the chat.
Okay,
so I can
for
take
sure.
it over to you. All right.
You said we didn't get a bunch of questions or no?
Yeah. We got a few in, and there's some good ones that we can hit. Like someone asked, a lot of people were asking about Justin Smith and Curtis Jones. I did not even realize Curtis Jones didn't play until I heard Archie mention him in the postgame press conference. And I was like, holy crap, he didn't even see the floor.
They just tightened the rotation for that game. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not all that different than what Krzyzewski said after the game, where how as much as he played, all their best players. So
yeah, he said those guys need to play big minutes to get where we want to go, to win like we want to win. So you got to do it in the regular season to get them ready. So
yep.
All right, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Go to assemblycall.com/join to learn how to subscribe to our email newsletter. And you really should. If you want to get more out of being an IU basketball fan, you should be on our newsletter list. You will get our weekly 6-banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our post-game analysis emails. And the best part is it's all free, and it will make you a smarter IU basketball fan. The URL is assemblycall.com/join. All right, I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Michael Dugan, and we are talking about the Indiana Hoosiers, as we always do here on Assembly Call Radio. And in our last segment, we talked about what we know about this Indiana team so far, and obviously there's not a lot that we know for sure. We're still learning a lot about this team, and that means that there are a lot of questions. And so in this segment, we want to talk about what some of the most important questions are that we need to find out about this Indiana team, and that will probably get answered over these next 4 games because of the competition level that Indiana is going to be playing. And Andy, between segments, you brought up a good one, which is the turnovers, because the improvement has been drastic, especially over these last 4 games. And I know in particular, the last 3 games, 8, 8, and 9 turnovers, which is such a far cry from what Indiana was doing last year. And so it feels like we kind of know that this team is better at taking care of the ball. We certainly know for a fact that it's a bigger emphasis than it's been in years past. But where do you come down on this one? Have we seen enough yet to know that turnovers are no longer really going to be an issue? Or, when you look at that second half against Duke, and Indiana had 7 turnovers when, the pressure ratcheted up a little bit as winning time approached, does that give you a little bit of pause to say, hey, we're better, but this team still has to continue answering this question against better competition?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a positive sign, but it's after, the struggles that we've watched some of these last few seasons, I think, a 4-game stretch of positive development there is not enough to, put the scars of the past away for good. So I'm not at that point yet, but it is encouraging. And I think what's as encouraging as that, and you alluded to it, is the emphasis on it and the repercussions, I guess, for guys who aren't taking good care of the basketball. And, that's something that I think has been a welcome sight to a lot of IU fans who have, watched guys make, silly mistakes, and there really seemed to be nothing that happened, in years past. And this is a case where, Archie has sat down guys immediately after they've taken a, quick shot that was essentially a turnover, after they've, thrown the ball away, trying to make too spectacular a play. So I think those things are positive, and maybe in another month, if we see that trend continue, then that becomes something that we know about the team. But I think at this point, we know how much they value taking care of the basketball. That's drilled home by Archie in so many press conferences. He talks about it with Al Durham, and that's why he's playing so much and what makes him so good as a freshman. So it's there, and it's beyond encouraging after the last couple of years that they've been able to kind of turn that around so quickly. But I'm not ready to close the book on that one quite yet.
Yeah, and one guy in particular who continues to struggle with turnovers is Josh Newkirk, who is turning it over on almost 25% of his possessions, which is a career worst for him. So while a lot of guys are doing better, he is not. And I think that's another big question that has to be answered for this team is, which Josh Newkirk are we going to get? Because he was obviously very good, probably played his best game against Eastern Michigan. I mean, in some ways, he was the best Hoosier that day. But really, despite playing 32 minutes against Duke, I didn't think had as much of a positive impact certainly on the game and struggled on both ends to just kind of get himself in rhythm. And so I think that's another big question, because if you're going to play a senior, you kind of expect some level of consistency and reliability. And so far, it's early in the season, and he proved last year that, it kind of took him a little while to get warmed up and kind of get into the season, and he was good toward the end of the year. But can Josh Newkirk become a consistent contributor out of that guard spot? I think that's another big question moving forward. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. For a short stretch there, I had more confidence when Colin Hartman was out. I had more confidence in him shooting a three than anybody else on the roster, which is kind of aggravating because he wasn't a great 3-point shooter. He really is. He's a decent 3-point shooter. He's not a great 3-point shooter. But with Robert Johnson misfiring, I thought that he added something. I thought he played well on defense last night for the most part. He overplayed a few screens and stuff like that and got caught up court a few times. But it'll be interesting to see how he develops and does he kind of get it with that system. And I do feel bad for Josh because this is the third system he's had to play in his college career. And it's, they've all been super different. There's really no crossover here. So we'll see how he responds to it. If he doesn't, you're going to see a lot more Devontae Green if he gets more consistent. I expect Colin Hartman to move into the starting lineup at some point. So one of those guys is going to be out of it permanently. Between Al Durham, Devontae Green, and Josh Newkirk, you're going to see at least two of those guys move out of the starting lineup. So we'll see, what Archie decides to do. But yeah, you got to be able to rely on your senior. I agree.
Regarding Josh and his 3-point attempts, I've noticed that throughout the course of this year and certainly toward the end of last year, he got a lot more confident with the ball. He was a guy that I was watching really closely coming into this year, and a guy that I had a lot higher expectations for. And last night before the game, we were in there 2 hours before tip. When I walked into the gym, Josh was about 4 feet beyond the arc, shooting 3 after 3 after 3 after 3. And then about 20 minutes later, was shooting more threes at the top of the arc, deep threes, coming off screens, off a dribble, just taking 3 after 3 after 3. And it's obviously a long road to go from such an unreliable 3-point shooter to a guy that you're confident in with the ball in his hands, 24, 25 feet behind the hoop. But just, as the season goes on, with this team's lack of productivity, I guess, from beyond the arc, his improvement and his, I guess, increase in confidence from beyond the arc could certainly play to Indiana's advantage. And that's something that, from an Indiana fan's perspective, I would hope just continues to increase. But to me, his confidence from beyond the arc has improved drastically. And I really noticed just him taking all those threes in warmups, just that being the focal point of what he was doing. That meant more to me probably than it should. But I think it means something.
Oh, yeah, I definitely don't think that this team is struggling to shoot from the outside or from the free throw line for a lack of effort or a lack of trying or a lack of practice. I think there's some confidence things going on. And if they can get on a roll, then maybe we can see some of those percentages go up and see a little bit more consistency. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Michael Dugan. And we're talking about the biggest questions that Indiana faces, that Indiana needs to answer moving forward as they look to continue their progression from the awfulness that we saw against Indiana State to, the very solid play that we saw against Duke. Andy, as you look at these Hoosiers, what do you think are some other questions that are going to be really important for Indiana to answer in a positive way, especially over these next 4 games, given the competition level?
I mean, I think the defense is a big one. I think we have noticed things. We touched on this before. I think we've noticed things where the system is starting to come together a little bit better for these guys, but the results haven't necessarily been there. And I'm not going to hold the Duke game against them again. A team that's got filled with pros and guys who are just monster athletes. But I do think that there have been other times when they have really struggled to contain other teams. The 3-point shooting was something that had really they'd struggled with, but did better against Duke for whatever reason. And so, some of those numbers are going to regress to the mean, and I think things will get to be a little bit back to normal. But at the same time, I do think that we need to see improvement from this team defensively, and each of these next few games provides some unique tests there. We know how efficient and good John Beilein offenses can be. Notre Dame, a lot in the same vein when those games come up. Iowa's, has struggled to this point this year, and Louisville is a really tough, kind of rugged team that's going to, play different offensively than those others. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to see the defense improve, but they have to continue to get better at stop and dribble penetration and not falling for shot fakes and closing out, out of control, because part of the pack line is being able to recover to shooters, but doing it in a controlled manner. So I think those are areas that they've really struggled with. And I think, Archie's not going to be happy as much as he apparently looks at KenPom to see his defense ranked like 219th or whatever it was coming into today. So that has to get better. I think that it will, but we need to see it.
Yeah. One other question I have, Ryan, I think you can address this, and you've addressed questions like this in the past, is, we're riding high after, the performance Wednesday night. And even though it was a 10-point loss, and even though our aspiration for the Indiana basketball program is to not be talking about moral victories, it's to be on a relatively even playing field with a team like Duke, and they come into your place and you expect to beat them. And most times you do. But this is, kind of a unique circumstance with, a coach with some players that he didn't recruit, putting in a new system. And so I think Indiana fans' optimism after a game like that shows that Indiana fans are having the patience and perspective that we should have to give this team the time it needs to make progress. So that's good. The question now, I think, for Indiana is, okay, we've seen that in this electric environment with Assembly Hall, rocking, they could really rise to the challenge for 35 minutes against an immensely talented team. Now, what do they do outside of that? What do they do when they go to Michigan for an afternoon start? Is that toughness, is that intensity still there? When they come back home and it's, maybe the atmosphere isn't quite as electric, are they still able to bring that same intensity, that same focus? And so I think, look, we know Archie is going to be demanding it and talking about it. But to me, I think that's a really big question for this team to answer, because it's a team that just as recently as 2-3 weeks ago, we're kind of questioning its toughness, questioning its maturity. And that's what I think allows a team to do that and be consistent, no matter the venue, no matter the circumstances, is maturity and toughness. And I think we're going to really find out if Indiana really has both of those qualities.
Yeah, I think Saturday will tell us a lot. I mean, how focused are they? I think focus is a big part of it. And I thought that was one of the things that really helped them Wednesday night was their focus. They were focused on what they needed to accomplish, what they wanted to do, and they stuck to it. And early morning games, 12:30, I guess, but you're warming up early in the morning. You're, eating earlier than you thought. You're shooting your warm-ups. You're getting into your walkthrough earlier. It's hard to get up for those games, particularly on the road. And we've talked about this for years. I hate those early morning games. I think they're awful. I think the Big Ten should get rid of them. I think it should be afternoon, like 3-4 o'clock, or night for all your games. But they continually schedule them, so you got to play them, and everybody has to play them, and they're stupid, but you got to do it. So how focused they come out on Saturday will tell us a lot, and how tough they play. Maybe they don't win at Michigan. Michigan, as Andy said, very efficient offense. Usually, they've got some players this year. Didn't play particularly well in Maui, but they certainly have the ability to do some things, and they're coming off of getting just absolutely shellacked by North Carolina, so they're going to come in motivated as well. We'll see. But I think that's going to answer some questions. Is, are they ready to actually be that tough all the time, or was that just a snapshot of what they can be and need to find more consistently? I think Saturday will tell us a lot.
Yeah, and I think the other question, look, I think there are, some questions that you could ask about Devontae Green. Are we going to get more good Devontae than bad Devontae? Although I think to a certain extent, he is what he is right now, which is an electric player, but also an inconsistent one. And hopefully you can smooth that out and get more of the good Devontae. But, Andy, I think the other really big question, and we've certainly alluded to this, but we're all waiting for Robert Johnson to get hot and get consistent as a shooter. But now at some point it's got to happen. We're now 7 games into the season and his shot form looks different every time he puts it up. And, at some point that's got to happen, or that's really no longer a question. It's just a reality for this team. And so I think that there is some potential there for Indiana to really improve if Robert can start knocking down threes consistently. We saw what that can look like when he and Josh really shoot well. But I think right now it is a massive question mark. And, with each game that goes by, like Duke, where it's, there's a good shooting performance and then a bad one, it's seeming more and more like the answer is it's just going to kind of be a crapshoot every game. And I think while Robert has played very well, man, that's the next step, that really takes him up into being, that all Big Ten level guard, is if he can start knocking down that shot consistently.
Yeah, it's the shooting of the team as a whole is a concern, and I think he was one of the guys who you thought coming into the season you kind of knew what you were getting from a shooting standpoint. But as you said, the form just doesn't look quite right, and he actually has started to appear, kind of the inverse of what his first few years was. He looks a lot more comfortable going to the basket than shooting away from it. And even one of the mid-range shots he hit last night, I thought was one of the worst shots he took over the course of the game, where he was kind of like a runner off the wrong leg and made a shot, but he just seems to be more comfortable that way. And at some point,
he's
it's
not
probably
thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, in the one shot that he took last night that was a little bit in rhythm, where he didn't hesitate, is the one that he made. And so, you've seen flashes of that in some of these games where he really steps into one confidently and looks like the way that he shot a couple years ago. But more often than not, it isn't that way. And he's got, this weird follow through and different things like that. That, again, I don't think any two shots look quite the same. But I think I think he's struggling a bit still with this role and trying to understand, balance out what Archie wants him to do in terms of getting the ball to the basket, where he's been really effective with still, needing and wanting to be able to be a guy this team can rely on from the outside. So, I don't know if that even comes this year, quite honestly. It needs to, I think, if this team's going to take the next step. But, if he becomes a guy who really relentlessly attacks the basket and gets to the free throw line, I think they can survive without it, but certainly takes him to another level if he can start to make those kinds of shots. But he just doesn't look comfortable enough and isn't taking enough of them in rhythm right now to make you feel like he's going to turn that around.
Yep. All right. Well, coming up in our final segment of Assembly Call Radio, you all sent in some great questions. We had a few about Justin Smith's playing time, about Curtis Jones, and some other topics. We will address those next as we close out this episode. Stick with us. All right. That was 1547, which gives us... how much time left?
What was it? 24 total?
Yeah. 8:13.
8, yeah.
7. $7.37. Yep. Okay. So we got 7 minutes and 37 seconds. So on these questions, so we'll talk about Justin Smith and Curtis Jones. We got another question about Robert Johnson, which we kind of just answered, but this will give us a little bit of a different angle. And then Derek's question about the environment, we kind of touched on that a little bit, but we can just reiterate that quickly. And then Ryan, you want to spend any time talking about your favorite coach?
No, I need
for
a
few minutes.
We need a segment for that. That's
full
because there's
segment.
a lot of reasons, and we can lower it out so you can set it up and sort of interview me a little bit about it, because it's not short.
Okay.
I've got like, it's one of those things where like somebody opens their wallet and says, "Oh, look at the pictures of my kids," and they all drop down to the floor. That's like my list of complaints about Coach K. It's like, yeah, I got them right here. Whoosh. I should really just get a scroll and do it.
Hey, if you guys have questions in the live chat, let us know. Put them in there because we may have some time to get to them. And so if we get done with this, Andy, let's just look ahead to these first, to these games coming up, and maybe talk about, like what we think the team's record will be in these 4 games.
Okay, that's fine. We can touch on that Big Ten stuff that I emailed about earlier too. I know I talked about maybe hitting it in the opening, but I never did.
That's right. Let's talk about that.
Hey, did
We'll
Michigan
end with
State
that.
beat
So,
Notre Dame?
if we want to hit.
Did Michigan State
killing
beat
them.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
They were up by 20 at halftime. I think it got to within 6 or 8 at one point, and then they won by 20, I think, in the end.
Yeah, I saw it when it was like 10 in the second half, so I wasn't sure if Notre Dame came back or not.
Yeah. ACC only won 11-3, so
Oh, well, that's
Suck
not.
it.
I mean, that's not
You're
too
good.
bad. What do you guys?
That's
What
not
do you
bad.
guys
would have won
complaining
all of
about?
them. So
Oh man.
yeah, anybody can win 11. Why don't you win 14?
Yeah.
Yeah, do something hard.
So damn good.
All righty. So we've got 7:37 for this. All right. Let's do this. You ready? Okay, here we go.
Yep.
You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Michael Dugan, my co-hosts on the Assembly Call IU postgame show, wrapping up another week of talking about Indiana basketball. And this is our segment where we answer your questions. And if you ever have a question for the show, just send it to us on Twitter at Assembly Call. Try to do it on Thursday. That's when we kind of gather all these questions up. So if you send it on Monday, you might forget about it by the time Thursday rolls around. So send it on Thursday, and it'll probably make its way into the show. So we had... This question came up a lot. This was by far the most popular question. Several people asked it, and it was, what happened to Justin Smith's playing time, and where was Curtis Jones? So, to me, it feels like the answer is kind of simple, and Ryan, I want to get your thoughts on it, but, obviously Colin Hartman was back, and that's going to cut into some of the time that Justin Smith is playing. I still thought maybe he would have gotten out there a little bit more, but, maybe it just wasn't the right kind of matchup for him. And as far as Curtis Jones goes, he's a guy who hasn't really been producing in games, certainly hasn't been shooting well. And Archie has been very clear about why guys are going to play. It's if you are producing in practice, and everything gets tracked. And so I just have to assume that, you compare him to a guy like Zach McRoberts. Zach McRoberts has been better in recent gameplay when he's been in there, and he must be better in practice. And it seems like it's probably that simple because Archie has kind of made it that simple.
I truly think that it's going to be how you practice is whether or not you get into the game or not, and how you play also. What I would say is that, for wondering why maybe Curtis Jones didn't play and why some other guys didn't get as many minutes Duke has insane length, so I think we were tending to go a little bigger, not necessarily longer or more athletic, but beefier. These guys were strong. We tried to go with our stronger guys down low to combat them defensively, and so I think that had a lot to do. Gary Trent is 6'6", and he's got to be like 220. The kid is ripped, and he was their small forward. So I think that you were trying to maybe match Duke a little bit more instead of just throwing out your guys and hoping they can defend. I think they were trying to match Duke player for player a bit. Justin, he's a freshman, and this is his first, second month of his career. I don't think there should be concerns because he didn't play much in a game against the number one team in the country. A lot of the older guys on that team played more because, they've earned the chance to play against the number one team in the country at home and play in that environment. As for a guy like Curtis Jones, I think, he's got to be more consistent on the court to get in a game like that. You can't afford mistakes in a game like that. And I think that what Archie tried to do was limit the guys on the floor who were going to make mistakes. And it worked because Indiana played close. You can complain about it if Indiana had gotten blown out of that game and you didn't see those guys, but they played close. So whatever the strategy he had going in was working from 90% of the game. So I thought that you can't really complain about it, can't be upset about it. And those guys just have to get at it harder in practice.
Andy, there's a question from John about Robert Johnson. How much is fair to expect from Robert offensively if we expect him to lock down the other team's best offensive player too, like he did? He was obviously guarding Grayson Allen. What should we expect from him, given that?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to think of it when you start to kind of put the little bit what I was talking about before. We're trying to balance. I need to attack the basket. This is what the coach wants. I need to try to get to the free throw line. I know I have to be a guy who can step up and knock down outside shots on a team that doesn't have a ton of outside shooting. And, oh, by the way, I got to exert a lot of energy defensively. So I do think that's probably fair to wonder if that isn't part of, the struggle with him. And he's got a lot on his plate right now, just in terms of all the things that he's being asked to do. So, and I think some of that you hear from Archie as well. And I think some of that comes from, we talked so much before about when he was struggling. You said, he's getting a lot of rope. Well, I think he's getting a lot of rope because he's being asked to do a lot, and he's doing a lot of things well. Might not be shooting the ball well, but I think he's done a little bit better taking care of the ball, and certainly has done a better job getting to the getting to the basket, and is doing a better job of finishing around the hoop. So I think it's an interesting question when you really step back and look. The problem is that there just aren't enough guys who have shown the ability to knock down 3-point shots in a way that he has earlier in his career. So I think it's natural for everybody to look at a senior who's played a ton of games and say, you need to do this as well. Doesn't really matter what else he's got going on. So it's a fair question. I think that's why he's getting a little bit of leeway from Archie on some of the shooting woes and not getting taken out. And the hook isn't quite as quick as it is for some other guys, for sure.
Yeah, we got another question from Derek. He's concerned that Indiana really was buoyed by the extraordinary crowd and wonders if the team is going to come out flat against Michigan. And we kind of addressed this. Ryan talked about it. But Derek asks, is there any argument, stats, or gut feeling you can use to alleviate some of that concern? I will just say, if you haven't watched it yet, again, go watch Archie's press conference from after the Duke game, because he was not a coach that was, resting on his laurels or, soaking up any type of moral victories, or that wasn't immediately focused on Michigan. And he mentioned it several times, on to Michigan, talked in his radio show about just being obsessed with improvement. And so my gut feeling is Indiana's going to come out and play well, because I just think their coach has such a razor sharp focus. And this is a team that really seems to be in tune with their coach right now. And so I would expect Indiana to come out and play well. I won't be shocked if they come out flat, because it's college kids and it's a weird, obviously, situation playing the afternoon game. And it's a prime letdown spot on the road afternoon game after an emotional big game. But I've got a little bit of faith in Archie. And so my gut feeling is that they will come out and play pretty well. But we'll just have to see. And I think however they do respond, it'll be pretty telling. Andy, we've got about a minute left. You want to talk to us about how awesome the Big Ten is, right?
Yeah, it stinks on ice, I would say, at this point. Yeah, I mean, I tweeted out some stats earlier today, and this isn't quite updated on KenPom. Against KenPom, top 25 teams, 4-11. This includes Michigan State's win over Notre Dame. So these are actually better than they were earlier in the day. Against the top 50, 6-18. Top 75, 8-23. So, and when you look, it really has separated who the kind of clear-cut top-tier teams are at this point. 8 of the 9 best wins have come from Michigan State, Purdue, or Minnesota. They've got 2 each in that realm. And so I think those 3 have clearly established themselves as the top 3 in the league. And you now look at a really, really crowded middle of the league that you watch the way IU played last night. You project some of the growth we've seen over the last few weeks going forward. Opportunity is there. There just haven't been a lot of good non-conference performances from the Big Ten. It's probably going to cost some team seed lines and probably in the end cost the league some bids. But what is probably a bad thing for the league might be a good thing for a team like IU, in the sense that they were never going to challenge for the title, but the part of it where they could aspire to is now more wide open than it looked before.
Yeah, that pick of 5th in the Big Ten is looking better and better by the day. All right, that'll do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording, or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. And cut. Excellent. Ryan, you look hungry.
I am also working, so a couple times there I had to mute you guys and watch what's going on. I'm getting buzzed by work. That's why it always looks like I'm looking at my phone if you're at home, guys. So where the hell are you? I'm recording my radio show. That's tonight? It's every Thursday.
Hey, so real quick, Ryan, before we let you go, just so talking through the next couple of shows. So Saturday, we're
still live too, by the way. Just so we're all clear.
That's fine. We can talk.
Well, it's fine.
I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to make sure Ryan knew, because I would never say anything on a live broadcast that I'm not supposed to say.
Well,
yeah. Go ahead.
That checks out. But either way, no. So Saturday is Ryan and Galen. I'll write the email. Monday, Jared, you said you can do the show. You think the post game?
That's
show.
Iowa. That's Iowa, right?
That's Iowa. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the Iowa game, and I'll be on for that one too.
Yep.
Because I think that one starts later, and I'll be home from Mallory's practice, so we should be good. All right. I just wanted to make sure we were good on the next couple. We can after Monday, we can make sure we're good for the ones after that. I can't think too much further out than that at this point. So,
and Michael, you'll be good for producing both of those after the game.
For Saturday, I can. For Monday, I cannot. But for Saturday, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Monday, I should be able to then. And then that's going to be, we'll figure out who's writing the email then for that one. I'll probably end up doing it because then I'm going to be gone for a couple weeks, or for a week. So I'll probably do that one. All right. So we'll be good.
All right. We can talk about the subsequent games after that, but just want to make sure we're good for the next couple.
Yep. Ryan, will you be able to do the Louisville game with Galen? Because he's going to host. I forgot to mention that on the show tonight. Well, at least for what's going to be on the podcast. But Galen's going to be hosting the next two shows, the next two Saturdays, because I'm going to be gone.
Okay. So
yeah, he actually mentioned it on Crimson Cast today that he was doing it.
So next Saturday? Okay.
Yeah,
I can do it.
Because those are the ones Andy can't be there for either. So,
where are you going?
My sister-in-law is getting married this weekend, and then we're going on a cruise after that. So, yeah,
lovely.
Yeah, and I don't trust cruise Wi-Fi to host the show. I figured it was safer to let someone else do that one.
It's like me trying to get on in Maui.
Yeah.
The only place with reliable Wi-Fi was the tournament.
And only the winners bracket.
In the 50s, they haven't gotten reliable broadband since then. You can't wire that place. Come on, guys.
I don't know.
It was awful.
All right. Well,
Michael, get back to work on seeing if Tennessee wants to take Mike DeBoard back, would you?
Oh my God, that sounds so hard.
We need people on the ground.
They're going to end up
trying to make that happen.
Yeah, someone get me in touch with Tennessee. I'll sell them Mike DeBoard real hard.
Is Lane Kiffin going to end up there, Ryan?
Oh God, I would love that.
Is he going back? Did you see Eric Ainge's tweets from a couple days ago?
Yes.
No,
and you know what? I thought Kiffin handled himself pretty well in that exchange. Quite frankly, the DM exchange. I mean, look, I will say this about Kiffin, and I can't stand the guy as a coach. He's become incredibly likable at FAU. His trolling is really entertaining. Like, it's very entertaining. And they were interviewing him the other day because he keeps tweeting stuff out about Nick Saban, and they were like, "Are you worried that like Nick Saban's going to be offended?" He's like, "Nick Saban doesn't even know what Twitter is. Like, it's not a big deal. He's never going to read Twitter."
No. Nice. All right, gents. Well, this has been fun. We will. I know people keep asking for Ryan's rant on Coach K, so
it's coming.
We'll figure that out. We can do that as a special episode. I'm putting together something on the 1993 team also, but I'm working on it. I'm working on an interview for that one. By the way,
there's going to be a quiet week somewhere where we'll
Christmas. There's a big gap over Christmas.
Yeah, we'll do it then,
and we can record at any time and just know. It's not like in between recording and posting that you're going to have a change of heart and suddenly like.
You don't think that's in the cards? I don't know.
No,
seems pretty unlikely. But you never know.
I mean, I felt this way since 1990.
Once you watch that post-game interview, once you watch that post-game interview Jared referenced, I feel like your team's going to change.
Look, I was in the same room as Coach K at the last time they played, and he was nothing but complimentary about IU. Still hate his guts.
All right, I will say this: I gained a little bit of respect for Grayson Allen. I will say that.
Like, he said he has
a little bit.
No, he says things. He says the right things to your face, and then he trips you while you're trying to run down the court. I mean, no, I don't know.
I'm not. Maybe, but we base our thoughts on these guys on such limited interaction, and I've never.
Not with him. He's done it dozens of times.
No, he has, and I'm not saying I'm giving him a pass for it. I'm not even saying that I like him. I'm just saying there's now at least some evidence on the other side that it's not all bad. I guess is what I'm saying.
You're going soft, Morris.
No, I'm not going soft. I'm finding the positive in somebody. That's pretty much what I've always done. Fine.
I'm not with you on this. I'm not coming with you on that trail.
Well, I didn't expect you to be. I was opening it up for Andy. He's the opinion that everybody wants because people know where we're going to stand on it. Andy's the tiebreaker.
He's the moral center of the show. Forget it. I'm the moral center.
Sometimes you just got to step back and just let you guys just see what happens. It's fine.
You guys are way too nice. All right.
Okay, guys.
All right, sounds good.
Yep. We'll talk to you. We'll talk to you all on Saturday after IU Michigan. Very early. It won't even be lunchtime where Ryan is.
All right. Later.
See you guys.